City of Stevens Point Redevelopment Authority meeting, recorded October 14, 2024.
Alrighty, it's 2 p.m. I will call the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Stevens Point to order. The planner will take the roll.
Schleiss.
Here.
Gardner.
Here.
Kneebone is not present. Cooper is excused. Kemeter.
Aye. Here.
Vladeck.
Can see him.
He's unmuting.
Dave, are you able to let us know you're present, unmute, and let us know you're there?
Okay, yep, here I am.
All right. And then Barrett.
Can you hear me now?
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, good.
And Barrett. All right, we have
a quorum.
quorum today.
Persons who wish to address the board on specific agenda items other than a public hearing must register their request at this time. Those who wish to address the board during a public hearing are not required to identify themselves until the public hearing is declared open by the chairperson.
All right, sorry, 1 second. I'm a little bit, give me one moment here.
No problem.
Not used to our setup. This is the first time we're hosting. So we will get this. Sorry, y'all. Everyone online can see it, but you all cannot. Give me 1 second. Get this up. Present. All right, go ahead.
Alrighty, public comment for pre-registered individuals for matters appearing on the agenda. Do we have anybody? I don't think so. Item number 1, approval of minutes from the July 16, 2024 meeting of the Redevelopment Authority.
I move approval of the minutes of the Redevelopment Authority meeting of July 16, 2024, and move that they also be placed on file.
We have a motion. Jim was the second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 2, approval of modifications to the Housing Modernization Loan Program. Chris.
Sure thing. So the Housing Modernization Loan Program has been quite successful in the past year and a half that it's been in operation. We have had a few recommended changes just to ensure that staff time is being spent wisely on the program. One of which being the minimum loan value of $10,000. We now have the program at a sustainable level where the return from the loans is taking care of the loan processing software, and so we are hoping to ensure that staff time is being spent wisely now with the remainder of the loan values, the loan, I guess the dollars within the loan program. One other major change that we're hoping to set clearly within the narrative of the program is 2 things within change orders. We've had 2 projects so far that have had some level of change order. The first one resulted in a change order that was not notified to the city until after the work was complete. We would like to stay up on top of the dollar amount before it's awarded to the contractor. The second is establishing a change order fee for additional administrative burden for change orders that result from work not being on the original application. We did have one applicant who had a decent amount of work, maybe about 2 additional projects to be included that were eligible costs, that we didn't see an issue with awarding those funds, but did add additional staff time and labor to ensure that that work had gotten covered by the loan program. So the only 2 things that we're hoping to do is establish very clearly rules for applicants that when you submit your application, you are not going to be adding anything, and if you do add something that results in additional administrative time for staff to review the work being done on your property. Just trying to be mindful of the amount of time we're using from both my desk, but then also from our inspection department as well.
Commissioners, questions? Motions?
Do you have a fee in mind?
We have established at $100 for one. We have a $30 fee for having to re-record any loan value for the project, and then the additional half-hour inspection time and 15 minutes of my time to process the change.
I think it's reasonable.
I would expect that there'd be a lot of change orders when you get it into older houses. I'm not surprised. I wonder if you say limit it to one change order here, if they come in with a second, what are you going to do?
Well, and so the intent of having the one change order is that you proceed with the project as much as possible, and at which point the number of changes that you are requesting are included on one request, and that is the hope and intent. So for the two projects that we had received where change orders were necessary, one of them was a minor change to the roofing project. They continued throughout the project, found a certain number of I guess a certain dollar amount of work needed to be done on the substructure. They took care of that in one change order request. With the other project, for example, where some of the changes were elective, rather than processing 2 or 3 of those, notify them, we're only allowing you to do this once.
Right.
Ensure that you're having all of the work documented so that way we can proceed as is.
I used to handle it a little bit differently. I would receive their request for the additional work. I would check to make sure we had enough funding in the program to cover that cost. I would give them a conditional approval with the understanding that at the end of the project, they would be signing an additional mortgage document for that additional work. That allowed me to add up some additional change orders that might come through. It was kind of at the very end. The tricky part is making sure that there's still enough funding in the program so that they don't get to the end and there's no money in the bank, right? I think we would, depending on the level of comfort in that particular situation, we might even have them sign a promissory note that wasn't recorded with a mortgage. It was just held, right? Just a temporary placeholder. Then when everything was done, then we totaled everything and
Right.
recorded an additional mortgage.
And that's essentially the process that we're going through in this
Great.
case, where we would encourage only one change order
Sure.
to be recorded for the mortgage.
The big surprise is if it's more than what
Yeah.
you anticipated
Right.
for that project.
Yep, and all of our financial records are being communicated to all of the loan applicants for, I guess, the running loan total is being communicated to the applicant through the process. So they know how much their loan is, what their expected monthly payment to be is.
Yep.
So there's no surprises when we get to
It's
the end of the process.
It's that bill at the end of the big extravagant dinner, right? That's what gets them sometimes.
Yeah.
They say, well, there's no way this was this much. So, yeah, keeping them informed, that's the best thing to do. It sounds like a great plan.
Motions?
I would make a motion to approve the changes, but I'd also make some allowance for the non-elective changes that might occur on some of the substantial projects that, in the older homes, that just simply might crop up. So make some allowance for a second change order if it's non-elective, if it's something that just has to be addressed. And I'm not sure how you would include that in your in your directions here, but I think it's just an acknowledgement that if you start getting in some of these older homes, older projects, you're going to find some surprises. I have that from personal experience, and Jim, you've had a lot more experience than me on this.
Yeah, yeah.
There's maybe some allowance for the non-electives.
Sure.
So with that, I'd make a motion to approve with that adjustment kept in mind.
Second
I'll
by
second it.
Gene? Or Jim, take your pick. Discussion? Chris, take the roll.
Schleiss.
Aye.
Gardner.
Aye.
Commodore.
Aye.
Laddick.
Aye.
Barrett.
Aye.
Motion carries. Number 3, excuse me. Consideration of transferring parcel 281-2408-32202969 to the city of Stevens Point for the purposes of environmental cleanup.
All right, so pardon my, I guess, technological delay. I'm just going to minimize the presentation to ensure that we don't have any other folks joining online. That being said, there's nobody else adding in. Quick background on the site. So,
Excuse me, wasn't Dean Shuda down?
yep, Shuda is online.
Okay, all
I
right.
just wanted to make sure there's no one else in the waiting room.
Yeah, okay.
Add in. So, some background on the site history. You all may be familiar with the downtown Stevens Point Shopko site. The site itself is divided into 2 parcels after some reconfiguration and work that had been done in the past decade. Back in the 1980s, the Community Development Authority of the City of Stevens Point had acquired the properties to develop the mall in downtown Stevens Point. Following the life of the mall and the recent renovations in downtown Stevens Point, the Shopko parcel identified in the presentation had been acquired by the city in 2023. Prior to this acquisition, there were some environmental site assessments taken care of for the work to demolish the mall itself and to make the public parking lot just west of the Shopko parcel available to the community and the Cobblestone Hotel. The environmental study and environmental analysis was rather limited on the Shopko building itself and some of the parking lot parcel. Under the direction of Ryan Karnowski, the former community development director, the city had acquired the Shopko building in 2023, and raising of the building had begun in July of this year. Earlier this year, in January, the city did review development options for one of the parcels, and I'll go ahead and share some of the conceptual site plan here in a minute. But the redevelopment authority did retain ownership of the Shopko parking lot parcel, the parcel we're discussing today, 281-240-832202-969. That parking lot parcel does circumscribe most of the Shopko building, so the parcel does include land to the north of the Shopko building. I want to make sure that that's very clear. Earlier this year, also in January, and then moving into May, you may remember that we had community-wide meetings regarding the Downtown Targeted Area Master Plan. The Downtown Targeted Area Master Plan had been constructed in 2019, but had not reached final approval from the council, from this body, due to the pandemic and the change in priorities as we responded to that emergency. But that plan was officially adopted earlier this year in May 2024, and included in that plan is a conceptual site plan for the Shopko parcels that included multiple residential buildings, a few mixed use, commercial first floor residential, second and third floor buildings, and an enhancement to the downtown transit center. Now it was a conceptual plan. One other element, a small park, was also recommended as a part of the plan. Included in this plan too was the prioritization of underground parking where possible. Again, that recommendation was made with only some knowledge of the environmental contamination or the extent of environmental contamination on the site. This is in line with a few of the recommendations from the housing study that was produced in 2017. That's still valid, may need to be updated soon. But to continue to promote development that is multifamily in nature in the downtown, also follow the same built environment characteristics with buildings close to the street frontage, and then promote the walkability of the downtown by utilizing space as efficiently as possible and utilizing down or underground parking where feasible. I could go over all of the characteristics of buildings A, B, C, D, E in the transit center, but this was built as a conceptual plan, and those numbers are a target. They're not necessarily what will be the outcome for the site. The city did receive some development proposals, or at least one option for the building BC, and that developer did apply for low-income housing tax credits as a part of that project, and they were announced an award late in 2023 for that project. So they have a pretty strong financial backing for that project. Their financing is not secured for that project. Knowing that we have this conceptual site plan, we've been working on producing some information for our local and regional developers to start to proceed with development of the downtown site. You'll see in this map 2 lengths of proposed right-of-way, 66-foot street, to reconnect Strongs and Union, and then to reconnect College Court to that Strongs and Union connection. This produces 3, at least conceptually 3 large lots for redevelopment. What we'll call proposed lot number 1, proposed lot number 2, and proposed lot number 3, and then the additional outlot for the park as described in the plan. Again, that's a component of the plan. The final destination or location for that park could be still discussed at this point. The city staff have been reviewing the environmental contamination since this was produced. We've been working with Stantec pretty continuously on the evaluation of the site. We were awarded a brownfield or a community-wide assessment grant. We have been receiving community-wide assessment grants in the past few years, and this may be the last one that we receive for some time due to changes in the brownfield, the community-wide assessment grant construction, their eligibility criteria. So we have a limited amount of time that we know of to utilize the information that we've been given. And Stantec did a wonderful job evaluating the sites for both the Shopko building and the Shopko parking lot. So we do have a full site investigation that can be shared, and we'll go over some of the details of that environmental contamination shortly. They also found the depth of the groundwater ranged from 10.5 to 15.5 feet throughout the Shopko building and throughout the Shopko parking lot site. The shallowest area is in the northwest corner of the Shopko building parcel. Now, you may be curious about what resources and tools that we have available to assist with brownfield redevelopment. 2 of the most accessible ones are the Environmental Protection Agency's brownfields programs. There's no matching requirement for this program, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law that had been passed. The Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation's brownfield program produces or requires a 1-to-1 match with a cap at $2 million. The cap for the Environmental Protection Agency's program is $4 million. So we do have a considerable amount of financial resources available to assist with the redevelopment at the site. So just very quickly, the environmental analysis included investigation at multiple monitoring sites, also showcases the previous work that had been done to excavate contaminated soil as a part of the mall redevelopment, and then the previous locations of different service centers, printing facilities. It does not show the Dunright Cleaner contamination to the north, but will show the groundwater contamination that was likely caused by some of those operations. So on the site, And I might want to take a quick pause here. The Stantec, the team helping us construct the grant application, will be providing a more in-depth presentation of the brownfield cleanup grant application at Common Council next Monday. So I highly encourage you, if you want to know more details about the application itself and for the contamination that has been investigated, to please attend that meeting. So this is a very, very shallow overview, but illustrated in the following images are locations of found contamination. This first image is are toxic heavy metals located on the site, and then I'll show later where this lines up on the conceptual site plan, but you'll see that we have some heavy toxic metals on the site, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons on the site, both at a depth to concern contact, and then also to concern for groundwater contamination. So the circles in blue are areas where there's potential impact to the groundwater. Circles in red are areas to avoid direct contact. And then the following image is our groundwater contamination. So you'll see that groundwater contamination is found throughout the site. So our depth to groundwater, is 10.5 to 15.5 feet, depending on where we are on the site. Will limit our ability to install underground parking, or at least limit it. It is still feasible. We've had this conversation with the architects on the team for the proposed low-income housing tax credit project, that underground parking is feasible still at that depth to groundwater. We're not concerned about the ability for them to install that, them or any other developer for that matter. So our knowing that we have interested developers and a plan ready and awarded funds and state assistance for development of the project on proposed site number 2, some public work to be done to accelerate redevelopment of the site in the right-of-way, and then the limited size of proposed lot number 1. The city thinks it wise to apply for EPA brownfield cleanup grants and the funding through that to address the environmental contamination on those sites. There had been some internal conversations with the public utilities and transportation regarding the transit center and whether or not proposed lot number 1 may be more appropriate for that transit center given the depth to groundwater at that site and the limited financing available in this round of funding. So we may consider a discussion with Redevelopment Authority, Common Council at a later date regarding the final location of that transit center, but still find it wise to apply for funding to address the contamination at those sites in the right-of-way, so that way we can accelerate redevelopment at those locations. Now, there's a broader conversation at hand whether or not the Redevelopment Authority be the entity to, in the future, apply for these grants. At this point in time, the Redevelopment Authority does not have a unique entity identification number. And at this point, the process to apply for that federal unique entity identification number takes 6 to 8 weeks. So we'd be post deadline for the EPA brownfield cleanup grant. The deadline is November 14th. And to ensure eligibility in this year to assist with the redevelopment downtown, Redevelopment Authority would not be eligible to apply at this point. The team putting the grant together between Department of Public Works, Public Utilities, Stantec, and myself estimated the project cost for the brownfield cleanup grant to be $3.9 million. So we are glad that we're underneath that threshold of $4 million. We're quite surprised to hear that we are as close as we are. We just had those numbers updated this afternoon and just got off the phone with Stantec earlier to understand just how large of a application we're putting together. The team from Stantec is quite confident that we have a great narrative for a grant application. The extent of the contamination is quite large, and the Brownfield Cleanup Grant has a high likelihood of success from their team. The success rate at even 22 points off the total is about 90%, so 88% chance that we would receive the funding. And there will be more funds available in fiscal year 2025 than there was in 2024. So we do feel rather confident in the team that they will be putting together a very competitive grant application, and that if applying, we have a good chance of success. If we aren't awarded the grant, the WEDC Brownfield grant is still available. Did have a few questions about whether or not, if the proposed housing development were to not complete their funding, or not be able to acquire all the funding necessary to complete the project, what happens to the financing for the project. The grant would still be awarded to the city of Stevens Point, and the timeline would be, I guess the grant award lasts for 4 years. So the team, the city would have about 4 years to locate another developer that could execute the project and complete it. So we are very confident that even if the current developer on the site does not succeed, that applying for this grant will get us teed up a little bit more for the next developer. We can proceed more quickly. So for the proposed grant application, and again, more information to come next week. This is an overlay of the site again. So outlined in pink is the Shopko parcel and the parking lot parcel. Everything that is hashed in, or has the black hash lines, that would be the proposed cleanup site. So everything within this hash line would be addressed for the cleanup. Now, I'll be very, very clear that the amount of soil removed is dependent on the development that is taking place there. So, for example, we've been working with our Public Works and Utilities team to understand just how much soil will be removed from that right-of-way to prepare for that work. And so the dollar amounts requested for each of these 3 portions, proposed Lot 1, proposed Lot 2, and the right-of-way work, is true to this map and those development plans. We would still be able to address the contamination for a subsequent housing development on proposed Lot 2, utilizing the footprint that the current developer has produced. Some other small asterisks of information on this proposed site. There had been a significant amount of testing and sampling. The Stantec team would like to do just a little bit more, so that way there are a few gaps in that initial sampling, to do just a few more sites to ensure that if there are any areas that aren't contaminated, that we're not removing that soil unnecessarily. So the funds from that could be reallocated as needed. So, given the amount of contamination on the Shopko building itself, underneath the Shopko building itself, the Shopko parking lot, and the requirements of the grant application, we find ourselves in a situation where the ownership of the parcels needs to be addressed. Both of the parcels need to be owned by a single entity, and the city of Stevens Point right now is the only entity that has the infrastructure to apply for the EPA Brownfield Cleanup Grant. It would be an unmatched $3.9 million to assist with the cleanup. Knowing that it is this body's authority to oversee the redevelopment of the city, staff would, if there are any concerns about issuing or transferring ownership of that parcel into the city of Stevens Point, that there could be additional conditions presented as a part of the transfer. So it would be our recommendation to transfer complete ownership of the parking lot to the city of Stevens Point to go carry out the environmental cleanup of the right-of-way and proposed lots 1 and 2. And then following the environmental cleanup, the parcels would be redrawn, and that if the redevelopment authority would receive ownership of proposed lot number 3 following the redrawing of the parcels. Now, there's been the question that what happens for the proposed lot number 2 if the if the proposed development does not get carried out. a condition could be placed that proposed lot number 2 also be returned to the redevelopment authority. Now, the information regarding the length or the duration of ownership of the grant and the ability to use those funds for another development was just discussed today. It would not be my recommendation to return ownership of proposed lot number 2 during the grant award. So if the grant was awarded to the city of Stevens Point, it would not be my recommendation to ask for proposed lot number 2 back until after the grant expires. So we look to transfer that Shopko parking lot parcel to the city of Stevens Point in a condition where proposed lot number 3 be returned to the redevelopment authority after environmental cleanup is completed.
All righty, good presentation. Commissioners, questions? John?
Mr. Chairman, you heard that one of the proposed projects on, Chris, could you put up the map that is the, I guess, conceptual plan?
Yes,
Let's go with
sir.
that one first. Thank you. You heard that parcel BC has been working with the city. It's a tax credit project. That means it's an affordable housing or low-income project. As you know, I've been opposed to the idea of low-income housing project in that location for quite a number of reasons. I can read those off if you'd like, but I think you know some of the things I've said in the past. I think having an affordable housing project somewhere in the city is maybe a good idea. That's for the city to decide, but that's our land there, and it's for us to decide whether that's the appropriate location. It may be a good project, but it may be in the wrong spot. I've had occasion to talk to the police chief, and the police chief shares some of the concerns of locating affordable housing in that location. Due to the history of other affordable housing projects in the city, as well as the underground parking being perhaps an attraction to, let's say, control unused people using the underground parking for other things other than parking. I'm in favor of cleaning up the site. I'm in favor of housing on the site. I'm just not in favor of affordable housing on that site. I'd be interested in hearing what other commissioners have to say about that. I also have some concerns about putting the transit center on lot number 1. I've not heard that prior to this presentation today. I've prepared a motion to transfer property to the city for the purposes of the cleanup, but only for the purposes of cleanup, not for development of the site. And once the site has been cleaned up, return that property to the redevelopment authority, and then we would participate with the city on deciding the future use of the property. So I throw that out as an option to the commissioners. If you want to talk about the use first or the transfer second, I throw that out as at least my opinion. And I'm prepared to make a motion to support the cleanup, but not to support the development.
Commissioners, questions, comments?
I think the issue at hand is the cleanup, right?
Pardon?
This is secondary. So I agree with you that the issue at hand is cleaning it up, and then the ownership comes back to the redevelopment authority. And then we proceed with future development plans.
That's what I tried to say, and you condensed it very nicely. Summarize the thing.
Gene, any comments?
I guess I would agree with that. The Development Authority has been given the authority to deal with redevelopment, and I guess we'd like to own the property that we're redeveloping. So.
Question, Chris, on that proposed development, is that encroaching on RDA land?
Yes, so let me circle back to this map. So to first answer Chairman Schleiss's question, the proposed development for the project at proposed lot number 2 aligns with Centerpoint Drive, is quite close to Centerpoint Drive and along Church Street and along the Strong's Union connection. It is a building that is essentially an upside-down U that fronts Centerpoint mostly. So the development takes place on both parcels, both the parking lot and the building parcel. Now, I will state that it does not take up any of the parking lot to the south. So all of the existing parking, and we were quite intentional about this, so the environmental cleanup funds were not sought after for the cleanup of proposed lot 3. So that way we aren't unnecessarily removing parking from the downtown while we're exercising redevelopment plans. It would still be our recommendation to assist with the low-income housing tax credit project at this site for the simplicity of the grant itself. Administering the grant and then requesting or requiring this parcel to be returned in the middle of their funding requirements would be inherently problematic. It would make it much more difficult to administer the finances, and to be frank, I'm not exactly sure it would be possible. Regarding the need for low-income housing tax credit projects within the city or assistance, I did discuss with Chief Cousteau some of the concerns today on the phone. The primary concern is the amount of amenities available at the transit center, whether or not there are bathrooms available to the public, what the access to those bathrooms is like. Will it be monitored? Which part of the development plan is it going to be installed on? Regarding the concern of folks at the proposed project for proposed lot number 2, that project includes wraparound services, and I'm going to further define wraparound services as services to help residents acquire financial aid for food, for their energy bills, accessing mental health counseling services, and accessing other community services is an integrated part of that development plan. So wanted to address that also. I also wanted to address the I guess requirements of the low-income housing tax credit award. In that proposed site, as this body had discussed before, the building would be available to a variety of income levels. While reviewing the narrative for the grant application with Stantec, the median household income for this census block tract, the block tract itself is about $36,000 per year, which illustrates to us that majority of the people currently living within the block tract would be able to live within this housing development, which I think is a very important piece of information for you all to know. But you're right, the primary question at hand is the environmental cleanup. This body is being requested to transfer this ownership of the property to assist with the brownfield cleanup. And we have an opportunity to acquire a significant amount of funds to assist with that without any city obligation or any taxpayer.
My concern is that the powers that be are negotiating development on this particular area on property they do not own, and they have never came to the RDA and proposed and seen what our thoughts were. That's not cool. So it's not part of this motion or whatever, but I will, and once we get our new director on board, let him get his feet wet and everything else, we will call a closed session of the RDA, and so we can find out what we don't know. because we don't know what's being proposed, we don't know what's been promised, and we sure as heck better find out before anything gets approved. So going on with that, Commissioner Gardner, if you have a motion?
Well, let me pass these around. I've got two options for the commission to consider, one for each of you. And Mr. Laddick, I apologize, you're just going to have to follow along. And I have one for the audience as well, if you'd like.
Thank you.
What I've done is I've broken it into two pieces. And let me preface this by saying I am not an attorney. I do not pretend to be one. This should be drafted up in a way that, again, the intent is to make it available to the city so they can do the grant, so they can complete the grant. Actually, it says complete the grant, and after the grant is completed, then return the property to the portion that we control now, deed to them, return it back to us without any development happening until that joint meeting happens that the chairman just talked about. And so the first half of that is if we transfer all of the land, all the way from Main Street, all the way up to Center Point Drive. The second part of it is if we only transfer the portions of Lot 1 and 2. And frankly, that's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to define what Lot 1 and 2 is as a survey or something like that. We don't know lots, meets and bounds, and I'll let the experts deal with that. But the conditions that I've suggested placing on it is that no development take place and no transfers of the land take place to anybody other than the RDA until the grant is completed. The land is then returned to the city, to the Stevens Point Redevelopment Authority, at which time then we would work with the city for its future development. That's the intent here. That's what I think the first half says, if we returned all of it or if we returned just part of it. That's the broken up. So that's the intent, and that's what I'm trying.
And as part of that, you're asking that we retain legal counsel to draft it, or?
Well, the city attorney cannot represent both the city and the redevelopment authority. In a case like this where there's, I won't call it adversarial, but we're each have our own point of view, I think that we probably have to have legal counsel represent us, because I don't think the city attorney can do both. And if we're going to put conditions on this, I want to make sure that it's more than just a motion, that the conditions are actually a part of the deed, so that's enforceable.
Commissioners, opinions, questions?
Chris, what you were saying before, were you concerned that this condition of returning the property after the cleanup's done was going to mess with the potential for the development?
Correct, yeah. My concern, if the stipulation is that proposed lot number 2 be returned to the redevelopment authority rather than to the
Stay with the city.
yeah, rather than staying with the city in agreement with the developer to proceed with the project, that we effectively have a cleanup plan put together for the site that we can't move forward on. We can hold on to those funds and proceed when the time is right, when we have a different proposal ready for it, but until the grant's going to be awarded to the city of Stevens Point, and if we were to return that portion of the parcel, we wouldn't be able to proceed with any sort of cleanup. It needs to be under city ownership until...
Right, it needs to be under city ownership, but does there have to be a development plan in place in concert with the cleanup plan?
It accelerates the redevelopment of the site significantly if it's happening in concert.
Other questions, comments? I support Commissioner Gardner's motion over here, and also to retain the legal counsel so that the land is technically protected and comes back to the RDA. And if there need to be any type of a adjustment later after we have a closed session and see what's been promised and what hasn't, we could address it at that particular time. But right now, we don't know of anything that may have been or going on in the background that may impact what happens with the rest of the parking lot. And I think, yes, to transfer it over so we can get the cleanup going, that's basically the thing on the agenda. Do I have a second?
Well, wait, now, there's two parts here.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what's the preference of the commission? Would it be all of the land from Main Street up to Center Point?
I'd be fine with all of it.
If I may, regarding the second option on the transfer only of land north of College Avenue extended, this has been a discussion internally with city staff and with our surveyor, that to execute the transfer of land land north of College Avenue only, we would need to redraw the parcel boundaries. And when there are two entities involved, two different owners, it is almost impossible
It
to
gets
do.
complicated.
Correct.
Yeah.
Very, very complicated.
So much more simple process to do the whole thing.
And if we're to meet the deadline of the grant application,
Right.
that would,
Time is of the
yeah,
essence.
this would be very prohibitive to that.
Mr. Chairman, let me make the motion then, that the Stevens Point Redevelopment Authority would transfer all the land described as that long parcel number ended in 2969, bounded by Main Street, Church Street, and Center Point Drive, informally known as the Shopko parking lot, for $1 and other valuable considerations with the following conditions. The land's transferred for the sole purpose of applying for an environmental cleanup grant only. In the event the grant is awarded to the city will proceed with the cleanup as stipulated in the grant. The city will transfer title to this property to the city will transfer title to this property, to the redevelopment authority at the conclusion of the cleanup and the closeout of the grant. In the event the grant is not awarded, the city will transfer the land back to the redevelopment authority immediately. The city shall not transfer any portion of this property to any other entity other than the redevelopment authority. The city further shall not develop any of the property for any purpose, including parkland, and shall not transfer any portion of the property to any other governmental entity for the development other than the transfer back to the redevelopment authority. That's the motion I'm making.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Gene. Discussion?
Again, the intent is to support the grant, the cleanup. The intent is to have them complete the cleanup. If in the interim period of time, the developer approaches the city for lot number 2, whether it's a tax advantage project or whether it's a private development without any advantages, then they could meet with us and we would discuss it at that point. We could always eliminate these restrictions at our choice.
So it's just a clarifying question. If the city proceeds with drafting a development agreement with the developer, at that point in time, you would wish to evaluate the content of that development agreement?
Correct.
I always have that option to bring it back to us, correct?
Inherent in that is to hire a separate attorney?
Yes, actually, there should be included that, retain a counsel to draft that transfer deed with the above conditions. And if any other, if the attorney raises any other issues that should be addressed, perhaps the chair can do it. If it's minor, if it's major, we have to bring it back to the redevelopment authority.
All righty. No other discussion? Take the roll.
Just wanted to ensure if Dave Laddick had any questions or
sorry.
comments. I see you online, but wanted to double check.
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Gardner.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that?
He said he's in agreement.
Okay.
All righty. Take the roll, please.
Schleiss.
Aye.
Gardner.
Aye.
Kemeter.
Aye.
Laddick,
Aye.
Barrett.
Aye.
Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.